The next talk is going to be different. So I'm going to sit down with Diana, who's about to come on stage. Initially, we thought we're going to do something related to monetizing and different models. Then we chatted a little bit, and we figured as much as that is interesting, there's something more interesting. Given her presence and background in the region and her physical presence in San Francisco, we'll try to figure out in roughly 20 to 30 minutes whether it's possible to be successful outside Silicon Valley. So Diana, please come on stage. So welcome.
Thank you. Hi, everyone.
Probably just a quick start. Who are you and your background, whatnot?
So a quick introduction. I'm Diana Moldavsky. I spent the last 3 years as a Chief Revenue Officer at Zap2Lab, the developer behind a popular game, Cut the Rope. Before that, I have been in consumer internet. I've worked at Google, at Yandex, and then OLX, which is marketplace, a global but localized marketplace. And so I am originally from Moscow, and I moved to Silicon Valley when I was 14 years old. So since high school, I was living in Cupertino and going to school next to Apple, and so I wasn't really thinking at that time that I will end up in tech, but sort of when you live in Silicon Valley, it's almost like impossible to end up in anything else, but I'm very happy now that I did. Since then, I also, so getting all my education in the US, I went to Santa Clara University, which is in the heart of Silicon Valley, for my undergrad and studied business there. And then I did my business degree in MBA in Duke University, Fuqua School of Business. And then I have, even though I lived in Silicon Valley since I was 14, I decided that I wanted to do something more international and global and emerging markets. And I ended up moving to Moscow, back to where I was born 10 years ago. And so the last 10 years, I've worked both in both in the US and then in Moscow, and kind of focusing on the Russian market, and then taking companies from Russia to international and US markets. So that's a quick intro here.
That's a quick intro. So yeah, a lot of experience here and there, like especially in the region, the US. We've talked, in the last day and a half a lot, what makes Silicon Valley so special and why your company is, thriving there. Some of, differences were brought up between Europe and Silicon Valley. So just quickly, if we could go back to that, your personal, experience so far. Why Silicon Valley is Silicon Valley, and why is Europe still, lacking behind, if we can put it that way? But we'll get back to it.
Sure. So it's not just Europe. It's there are certain things about Silicon Valley that are pretty special, that make it a very special place, that a lot of other countries and amazing cities and amazing countries have tried to replicate that, but it hasn't quite happened to be the same yet anywhere else. So there are some of the more traditional explanations and beliefs. So the traditional ones are, it's an educational hub. There is Stanford University, there is UC Berkeley, and so like great schools. And around the great schools, there is the great technology hub because of great computer science and engineering schools in these universities. So technology hub. At the same time, there is the Sand Hill Road and the VC hub, which is also, a lot of these guys went to Stanford University Business School. The more traditional explanations is kind of the educational center / tech center / VC and money center. So, which makes sense, if you end up, if you're going to school there and you end up as a VC or you end up on the tech side, and then you have the network, and so it sort of makes sense that you can raise the money, you can start a company there, and you can have this amazing talent to recruit, and so everything makes a lot of sense. Which is, if you think about it, this has, this can and has happened in other places around great schools as well. But there's also something very special, which is beyond this in Silicon Valley, is this kind of like this eternal optimism, and just, it's everybody is so positive and excited about this. And one other thing I would say, so I think that the optimism and this positive belief generally is a very special thing that really makes Silicon Valley very special. At the same time, I think also people are generally very open. And so, in a lot of other markets, I've seen people being less open to discuss their ideas, even when they want someone to mentor and help as an advisor. They would say, "Oh no, I can't tell you the idea," because everybody is so worried that they don't feel that there is the trust, and they feel like, okay, if I have an idea and this mentor, advisor, investor, they have more money and experience, they might just do it, and so which in Silicon Valley they believe is that ideas are really nothing. It's like what really matters is execution. So a lot of people end up a lot of times you see people working on the same ideas, but it's who makes it better. And if you think about it, Google was not the first company to create search, and not only they were not the first company in the US or globally to make search, but it was the execution and really making the product much better, what made it what it is. So yeah.
All right, so you mentioned a lot of advantages. So does that mean any company that's starting outside should, as a first thing, plan to move to San Francisco and be there physically present, or is this not as relevant nowadays?
I would say there is no black or white here. It's really, there's a lot of shaded area in between. So in the more recent years, we've seen a lot of very successful companies outside of Silicon Valley that were started outside of Silicon Valley, which had great, huge exits and hundreds of millions and billions of dollars. So just some that come to mind that have had very successful exits, and most of these companies that I'm thinking of, they are in they're mobile, they're gaming, they're connectivity and communication. Oh. So some of these great examples that come to mind are Skype, Viber, there is Supercell, there is King.com from the gaming side. So some that haven't had exits yet but are also successful, like Rovio from Helsinki as well. So is it possible to create something amazing, super successful, which is impacting the entire world, where has hundreds of millions and sometimes billions of users globally, and have that created in Europe, and specifically Nordics and Baltics and Eastern Europe? Yeah, it is quite possible. We see all these very amazing, successful companies. So I wouldn't say that, in the more recent days, it's not possible to be super successful without having been started in Silicon Valley. What we do usually end up seeing is most of these companies end up coming to US and specifically to Silicon Valley and having their presence there for business purposes, like for business development, sales, and fundraising. We end up seeing these guys at least having part of the team or local team there as well.
Sure. So our next panel is going to focus on major trends, and you touched a good point. There are certain industries that come to mind when you say outside Silicon Valley, like communications, gaming, especially for Europe nowadays. I think at this point we touched briefly, but it'd be interesting to hear from you guys. We're going to open up for Q&A. We have, I think, time for 5 or 10 questions, depending how fast we go. So anything you want to ask about, how to start a company outside the Valley, it's your chance right now. We have a microphone over there. So does anyone have a question to Diana? Or is everyone going to wait after the panel is over? Really? Not even a single question? Rasa, what do you think? Do you have a question to Diana about building a company outside Silicon Valley? All right, technical issues.
Yeah, thank you. So yeah, probably for me the most interesting point, there is a clear reason why those startups are craving to go to Silicon Valley and do something there, because they think that maybe there is no capital in Europe, maybe there are no connections. But if you could just list 3 points for summing up 3 reasons for staying in Europe.
That's a good one.
3 reasons for staying in Europe?
Staying in Europe.
So meaning like three reasons
Not
to
to go to
not,
Silicon
not
Valley.
go against Silicon Valley?
Because everyone wants to go to Silicon Valley, and we know like how well-developed ecosystem is there, right? But there are many startups, especially from the CE region, that are doing something in Europe, right? Like, what would be like those reasons that would keep you in Europe?
Okay, so one reason that comes to mind right away is you have really great technical talent in Europe, and you have much less competition for this technical talent in Europe. I think what you guys just heard Oliver say in the previous speech, he has engineering team here, and I think in Denmark as well. So that just gives you an example that actually you see companies from Silicon Valley expanding their teams on the tech side, especially to Europe, just because there's amazing talent, engineering talent, and development talent here. So I think in Silicon Valley you would have like huge competition. It would be much more expensive, and the competition is with companies like Google and Facebook and so on, and all these hundreds of startups. So basically, if you were to have your engineering team there, you would have to have like a different level of resources, and you would have to think from day one, of having a culture how to not only be able to hire these guys with this competition, but also to retain them, because that they can easily get any job they want any day, and they're getting messages on LinkedIn every day. Oh. So I would say this is one huge reason to if you are a European startup, a European team, and you are a technology startup, to stay here. The other reason is as I've mentioned, all these examples, particularly in mobile, in the recent years, that have been successful without being present in Silicon Valley, sure, or without being started there. With the way that we've seen the the app stores ecosystem, say in the last 5-6 years, ever since it started, it actually allows companies to be successful without being in Silicon Valley, because you can be a small developer anywhere in Europe, for example, or anywhere in the world for that matter, and you can launch your app or your game or whatever it is on Apple App Store or on Google Play and so on, without having any presence in Silicon Valley at all, because so you basically can right now, and so you can use your amazing technical skills and technical teams here, and then you actually can launch it. Successfully to U.S. market, and to even more so to the world market, without having presence there. And we've seen all those great examples in mobile and specifically in gaming. So I would say those would be some of the top reasons to that it's okay to stay.
I guess that's a good wrap-up of what we discussed, and kind of a path to our next panel discussion about the global major trends, right? And especially the ones that maybe can be developed outside Silicon Valley. So I guess at this point, I'll call it the end of this panel. Thank you so much. If anyone has any questions, Diana is going to be here. So grab her, ask her about anything, how to start a company here in the region and then move to the US, or vice versa, or whatever you come up with. And at this point, thank you. And our next panelists, Ravi, Marvin, and Shri, please come on stage.
All right, thanks, guys.
Thank you.